Welcome to the Mycitizenagency channel. When it comes to European citizenship, attention often immediately shifts to large countries such as Germany, France, Italy, and Spain. They are well known, with strong economies and a clear international image. But in practice, more and more people are considering another option: citizenship of smaller EU countries. This raises a logical question. Does such a passport really offer serious advantages, or are there restrictions behind it that are rarely discussed openly? In this video, we will analyze the pros and cons of citizenship in small European Union countries, who this option might suit, and who should look for other solutions. First, it is important to understand a key point. Citizenship of any EU country is not just a status within one specific country. It also gives you access to the rights of a European Union citizen. This means that you get the opportunity to live, work, study, develop a business, and plan your life more freely within the entire European Union. That is why many people consider not the most famous country, but the path that may be the most reasonable, stable, and promising in their particular situation. The first and most important advantage is access to the entire EU. If you obtain citizenship of a small European country, you are not limited to its territory. You gain the right to live in another EU country, find a job without complicated barriers, take advantage of educational opportunities, discover new professional directions, and make long-term plans throughout Europe. For many, this is the key value of such status. It is not just about living in one specific country, but about a much wider choice. You can focus on the labor market, standard of living, educational environment, or business format that best suits your goals. In practice, this means that you can obtain citizenship in one country and pursue your personal, family, or professional plans in another. It is this flexibility that makes EU citizenship particularly valuable in the long term. The next advantage is a more peaceful and predictable environment. Small EU countries often attract people with their high level of security, measured pace of life, less congested cities, and more understandable administrative system. For many, this is not just a pleasant bonus, but a really important factor when choosing a country for the future, especially when it comes to moving with a family or long-term life planning. In such countries, people often value not the scale, but the quality of their everyday environment: convenient urban infrastructure, a calmer pace, less everyday stress, and a more predictable organization of many processes. This can be particularly noticeable in terms of transportation, security, communication with government agencies, and the overall level of comfort in daily life. If you evaluate not only the document itself, but also the quality of everyday life, then a small European country may turn out to be much more comfortable than a large metropolis with high levels of stress, constant pressure on infrastructure, and a feeling of overload in many areas. Another important advantage is the transparency of the legal system. In small EU countries, issues of status, registration, tax residency, property ownership, and family law are usually regulated clearly and consistently. This is especially important for those who want to build a legal and long-term strategy without unnecessary uncertainty and without the constant risk of encountering unexpected changes in everyday procedures. For many clients, the value lies precisely in the feeling of clear rules. When you understand how the system works, what documents are required, how the procedure is structured, and what steps you need to take, it becomes easier to plan not only the registration process itself, but also your future life from moving to resolving family and property issues. For the client, this means clear rules, official procedures, and a more predictable outcome with competent case management. And it is precisely this legal certainty that often becomes one of the key factors when choosing a country for a long-term strategy. Very often, citizenship is considered not for one person, but for the whole family. In this case, an EU passport becomes a tool for long-term planning. This applies to children's education, access to healthcare, freedom of movement, a more stable future, and the ability to change your country of residence within the European Union without unnecessary complications. For families, this status often means much more than just a new document. It is an opportunity to build a more reliable life trajectory in advance, in which it is easier to plan for education, the adaptation of children, everyday comfort, and overall stability for several years to come. This is especially important for those who think not only about current convenience, but also about the prospects of the next generation. In other words, it is not just a matter of formal status, but of creating a stronger foundation for the years to come. And that is why the family factor often becomes one of the most compelling arguments in favor of European citizenship. Another advantage is the reputational and practical effect of European citizenship. Having an EU passport can play an important role in matters of international mobility, banking services, business activity, company registration, and the general perception of your legal status. In many situations, it is not only the document itself that matters, but also the level of trust associated with citizenship of a country that is part of the European legal space. For many, this becomes important not in theory but in practice. When it comes to building international contacts, long-term personal plans, working with financial instruments, or developing a business in a more understandable and stable environment, such status can be perceived as an additional element of stability and legal certainty. And here, it is not the size of the country that matters, but the very fact that we are talking about citizenship of a European Union member state. That is why even a passport from a small EU country can be of great value from a strategic perspective. But it would be wrong to talk only about the advantages. Citizenship of small EU countries also has its limitations, which are important to understand in advance before you start the process. It is at this stage that many people make the mistake of only considering the attractive side of the issue, without analyzing how well this option actually suits their goals. The first possible disadvantage is the limited market within the country itself. If you plan not only to obtain citizenship, but also to live in the country where you obtain your status, it is worth considering its size. In a small country, there are usually fewer job vacancies, a smaller service market, fewer business areas, and, in general, more limited opportunities within the local economy. This is especially important for those who associate relocation with career growth, active business development, or the search for the widest possible choice of professional fields. In a small country, the quality of life may be high, but the number of available options for work, project scaling, or rapid entry into new areas is often more limited than in the large economies of Europe. Therefore, it is important to understand right away. Do you want to build your life in this particular country, or do you see it as a starting point for further life in Europe? The answer to this question largely determines whether citizenship of a small country is really a good decision for you. There is a common misconception that it is easier to obtain citizenship in small countries. In practice, this is far from always being the case. In many cases, the requirements for applicants are very strict. It is important to confirm the grounds, prepare documents, comply with the procedure, pass checks, and prove the legal purity of the entire history. Moreover, it is precisely in small countries that attention to detail is often particularly high because each application is considered informally within the framework of a clearly structured legal logic. A small country does not mean a simplified path. Sometimes the opposite is true. Due to the careful consideration of each application, the procedure can be very detailed. Therefore, it is especially important to understand in advance what your case is based on, how strong your grounds are, and how competently the entire package of documents has been prepared. This largely determines not only the speed of the process, but also its final reliability. Another important point is the quality of your dossier. When applying for citizenship, your source of income, grounds for obtaining status, family documents, residence history, tax aspects, and the overall logic of the case may be carefully analyzed. In such processes, it is not only the availability of individual documents that matters, but also how consistently, convincingly, and legally correctly your entire history is structured. That is why the dossier is subject to high requirements. Any inaccuracies, gaps, weak arguments, or inconsistencies between documents can affect the perception of the case and complicate the process. This is especially true when it comes to a long-term strategy, where not only the submission of the application is important, but also the overall reliability of the entire legal structure. That is why going it alone often ends up not in savings but in wasted time, mistakes in strategy, and the need to correct mistakes that have already been made. In many cases, it is much more important to correctly assess the strength of your case from the outset and prepare a dossier so that it looks complete, well-founded, and professional. The next disadvantage is the linguistic and cultural factor. Small European countries often have a strong local identity, their own language, and their own integration characteristics. Even if English can be used in everyday life, it is not enough for full adaptation, completing a number of processes, and long-term residence. In practice, this means that comfort in a tourist or everyday setting and real integration into the local environment are not the same thing. To resolve administrative issues, communicate with institutions, enroll children in the educational environment, and build a sustainable life, knowledge of the local language and understanding of the cultural context often become really important. If you are considering not just obtaining a passport but actually living in the country, this issue must be taken into account in advance. The better you understand the characteristics of the local environment, the easier it will be not only to go through the adaptation stage, but also to feel confident in the long term. Perhaps the main disadvantage is that there is no single ideal small EU country for everyone. Very often people look for the best passport, although in practice you need to look for the best solution for your specific situation. When it comes to citizenship, universal formulas almost never work because each person has their own goals, time frames, family circumstances, professional plans, and expectations for their future status. For one person, the education of their children is important. For another, it is the opportunity to move to a stronger EU economy. For a third, it is capital protection and stability. For a fourth, it is the convenience of a family immigration strategy. In these cases, the same country can be either a strong solution or an unsuccessful choice. That is why, when making a choice, it is important to look not at the abstract attractiveness of a passport, but at how well a particular country and a particular path really fit your long-term goals. So who should really consider citizenship of small EU countries? First and foremost, those who think strategically and understand that European citizenship is not a formality or an emotional decision. It is a tool that should work towards your long-term goals. In such a matter, it is usually not the external status itself that is important, but the opportunities it opens up for you and your family for years to come. This option may be right for you if you want to obtain stable legal status, provide your family with more opportunities, expand your freedom of movement, and create a base for living, studying, or working within the European Union. This is especially true for those who want to build a more reliable and flexible scenario for the future in advance without limiting themselves to one country or one short-term goal. That is why citizenship of small EU countries is often a good solution for those who take a broad view of the situation, assess the prospects several steps ahead, and choose not the most high-profile option, but the one that truly meets their personal and family goals. Those who expect quick results are not prepared to seriously deal with paperwork or are only focused on the attractive phrase EU citizenship without delving into the details of the process should be particularly cautious about this choice. In practice, it is this approach that most often leads to false expectations. When attention is focused solely on the end goal, without understanding the grounds, procedures, and actual requirements, there is an increased risk of choosing a path that looks attractive on paper, but is not actually suitable for your situation. Therefore, it is especially important not to rush to conclusions, but to first objectively assess your options, documents, family circumstances, and long-term goals. It is this approach that usually leads to a more sustainable and legally sound solution. To sum up, citizenship of small EU countries is not a secondary or compromise option, as it may seem at first glance. In many cases, it is a truly strong strategic decision that provides access to the entire European Union, opens up more opportunities for the family, provides legal certainty, and allows for greater freedom in making long-term plans. However, it is important to understand the other side of the coin. This path is not always easy. It requires careful preparation, a strong dossier, an understanding of local specifics, and a clear assessment of how well the chosen country actually meets your goals. The main conclusion here is simple. You need to look not for the best passport in a general sense, but for the best route for your specific situation. And the more accurately this route is chosen from the outset, the higher the probability that the outcome will be truly reliable, legal, and promising in the long term. And if you are just planning to immigrate, leave a request for a free consultation at the link in the description. We will study your situation, draw up your personal immigration plan, and prepare a complete package of documents for successfully obtaining citizenship in one of the EU countries. We work individually, taking into account your goals, your lifestyle, and your situation. Thank you for watching this video. If you're interested in this topic, subscribe to our channel and feel free to ask questions in the comments. We regularly publish program reviews, answer frequently asked questions, and share important news about immigration law and life in the EU. Your journey to Europe begins with the first step. Mycitizenagency is there for you every step of the way.